Good morning, Kirsten. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Cody?
Kirsten and I were just saying she's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, so it's 10 a.m. for me and it's 7 a.m. for you now.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's bright and early. We've got Kirsten first thing in the morning, but I'm so happy you're here. Kirsten and I connected through a group that we were in and had some deep conversations over a beautiful dinner and have been sort of jamming ever since. And I'm so excited to have you and to talk about everything. So let's just start with like basic information, who you are, anything you want to share about what brought you to this now moment. I'll just let you roll.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen. My training started out as going to be a doctor of chiropractic, but then I quickly realized that my passion really is in nutrition. And I realized how important nutrition is and was for building a foundation for health. At the same time as my chiropractic degree, I got a master's in human nutrition and functional medicine, which really guided a lot of what I do now, like to this moment. I've had endometriosis, migraines, gamut of things. I've had skin, like acne issues. I've had GI issues. I had, at one point in time when I was at like the worst of my burnout, I was dealing with like daily hives, which was
Mm.
probably one of the most uncomfortable and like worst things that I've ever experienced. Um, and so the journey really up to now has really been how do I heal? How do I heal my body? How do I heal myself? And along that journey, also kind of what brought me to now is that I also realized that when you're, and this is so good, this is why I'm so excited to speak with you, but also why I love your work as well, is that like you come to find at a certain point that like all of those basic foundational pieces are really important, like the nutrition and making sure that all of your systems are supported and all of that. But also there's so much more that is usually tied into those chronic symptoms, mental, emotional, even like energetic, right? Spiritual, those pieces are all a part of what makes us human in that human journey. And they are a part of why we can sometimes end up getting chronic symptoms and illnesses. And so
Mm.
the going deeper is really where my sweet spot is like it's like building that foundation, but going a little bit deeper into why these symptoms happen because they're not usually random. And so
Hmm.
that's here today. That's what I do. And yeah, that brings us to the now.
And Kirsten is also a mom. We
Oh,
both
yes.
have children that are similar ages. Um, and
Yeah.
so, I'm sure that influences how you've started to see things as well.
Gosh, yeah, being a mom.
But no,
Yeah.
not at all.
No, yeah, yeah. No, it's been so interesting actually because let's go there. I
Hmm.
had a C-section with my daughter and it was like literally the last thing that I could possibly have ever wanted because one of the things that I know is and that they've shown in studies is that C-section kiddos typically end up later on in life having some health issues because of how it sets up the microbiome.
Right.
And although we do have studies that have shown that, a year afterwards, it seems like their gut corrects, there's there's still a fair amount of studies that have shown, that there is a potential like correlation, between the two. And it's one of the first questions that I ask, on my intake forms is like, were you born via C-section? Were you born
Mm.
via vaginal birth? Were you born via, whatever? And were you breastfed or not breastfed? Like these things are just a reality point. They're not, it doesn't, it just tells us more information about why somebody might be dealing with something later on. And so, being a mom it's a fun little journey. It's a fun little ride of, having this happen and then being like, okay, well, what can we do? What can I do to support her system? How do I help her nervous system? How do I help my
Mm.
nervous system? How do I help us have the best possible environment for her to be able to thrive with her health. And I do really believe that nutrition is kind of like one of those really underlying factors and pieces. And so there were some big things that we did and focused on. But yeah, I mean, being a mom and then also the just trying to figure out how do you put all of the pieces together. It's a thing.
Yeah, and you know it's so interesting. It's so interesting that we're starting here. I always sort of sometimes I question myself because I'm like, oh, I don't do enough planning and research and stuff. And then I get on the conversation. I'm like, this is why, because we always end up sort of starting and going where the conversation needs to go. And I so resonate with what you just said. And I think we've talked about this, but I feel like this is a very common experience. And so I want to talk about this, which is mothers that either have had some sort of health issue and so it's important to them, or just because of the way they live it's important to them, but we have all these ideas about how we want our birth to go, right? Like, and I cannot tell you, I'm sure you have this experience too, the amount of mothers that I talk to that had, oh, I want the home birth and the natural birth and all the things we want, and then had like the absolute opposite
Mhm.
happen, right? Myself included, right? My daughter, I have everyone here probably, unless you're listening to me for the first time, knows I have a comprehensive gut health current situation and also history. And
Sure.
so I was so focused on our daughter and her gut health.
Mhm.
And she was given IV antibiotics for the first 48 hours of her life. So
Ooh.
there's always like, and bathed immediately, all these things, right? And I'm so curious about, like, first of all, I'm so curious if you've done any work around like what that lesson was for you, like
Mm.
why, because we don't know why these things happen, right? I'm not saying we need to know why they happen. We're human. We don't get it. It's fine. But sort of like what the lessons were that you integrated, and also like how that sort of shifted the framing around how you think about, you know, like health and stuff like that. I don't know if I think I'm being clear, but like,
Yeah.
let's just talk about this because I think a lot of women can relate to this like
Mm.
fear. Oh my God, we messed them up from birth, right?
Okay, interrupt me if you want to, or if something sparks your curiosity, because this could be a little bit, but
No,
yes,
go for it.
1000%. So, um, gosh, the first part in all of that, well, there was a lot there. The the part for me that I learned, there were so many lessons. So right prior to I'll spare a lot of your listeners some of the like gory details of what happened, but basically, like, I ended up with preeclampsia, which automatically in and of itself was really surprising for me because I was so focused on, doing all of the things right through pregnancy. I was, eating well. I was and preeclampsia in and of itself is an inflammatory condition. It's where when the placenta is formed, there's lots of different influences that come into this, and dad also plays a role in that too.
Mm,
But the essentially what happens is at a certain point, how the placenta was formed, it releases inflammatory products, cytokines, things into the body that at a certain point in pregnancy become too much for the mom to be able to battle and to deal
mm,
with. And so preeclampsia then is when, that all of those symptoms just start to really pop up, and the mother's body is like, I can't sustain this pregnancy anymore.
mm,
So it can take a really big toll on your liver. It can take a really big toll on your kidneys. It can take a really big toll on, just these big, big, big factors, which is why they're testing for protein in your kidneys and they're doing all of those things. So the first one of the very, very clear things, one of the learnings, big learnings that came in for me was that I still had this underlying belief that my body was working against me.
mm,
My body was against me, that my body wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing because I was already overdue. And
overdue, quote unquote. She's
yeah,
using.
yeah, overdue,
I
right?
actually
I
I was
think she
writing something
was,
down. So was she? I don't know if Kirsten used air quotes, but I just used air quotes.
yeah, so 41 plus 2, I think is where she was at. She was like 41, I was at 41 weeks. So theoretically not necessarily overdue by any means, but she was
By
over
standards,
by
yes.
standards, she was over. And I had like somewhat climbing blood pressure, but not bad. It was to the point that it was concerning to me necessarily, but like everyone else was like, well, you're still within normal range, right? So anyway, that was one of the biggest learnings for me that I really got to like examine and work through was my body being against me in some way, shape, or
Mm,
form. And that is a really common one too, when you have some kind of chronic illness or some kind of chronic thing that your body has dealt with for potentially many, many years. The thing about those beliefs is that they're underneath the surface. You oftentimes aren't very aware, right, that those exist until you're talking with someone who's listening to you, and they're like, "Did you know that you
mm,
just said this?" And those thoughts, those words, the things that we say will often tell us a lot more about like what's actually going on in the subconscious mind and what is literally being created
mm-hmm.
from those beliefs. And that was one of the most powerful things that came through for that one and for that birth in particular was like this massive need to surrender. I mean, truly, I know that that's like the common thing, obviously, with birth is you have to be able to surrender. And that also happens to be a part of my life journey in and of
Mm,
itself, as you know, depending on your listeners and how into things they are. There's there's been some things that I have become aware of that are like surrendering is a very, very big part of my personal journey here on Earth for this lifetime. So seeing that through that lens, I mean, I'm very strong. I'm very like I persevere through a lot of things. But it is the surrendering to that the what could potentially happen, that any outcome is just the outcome of what it will be. That surrendering is tricky. It's hard. It's
so tricky.
yeah, and it ended up in this just like really kind of traumatic C-section situation. That then afterwards I had to do really a whole lot of healing around. Uh, I believe in some way, shape, or like in some capacity that uh that it's not just my birth experience, but it's also the child's birth experience too. Their way of coming into the world, I think in some ways is for them as well.
100%.
So that was another piece that I sort of had to grapple with because obviously as a mom, like I wanted her to have the best experience that we possibly could have, you know, and to then be able to just release that and be like, okay, like this is just the reality of like what happened. Then being also able to say, okay, also, I have no clue what or why she may have needed to have this experience, but this may literally be a very large part of how her journey has been meant to begin. And she's tough. I mean,
Mm.
she is like a strong-willed kid who is also very like open-hearted and
Mm.
super like sweet and like kind, but I mean, she is going to be like a strong kid. And so, you know, I think there's so much, right, that like you could go into with all of that. But those were like the really big, big, big lessons for me. And especially too, I'm pregnant now, so I'm going in, I'm a couple months out from this next one getting here. And the experience has been wildly different. There's been so
Mm.
much more ease throughout this whole entire pregnancy.
Mm.
I'm not afraid of, I mean, there's been so many conversations that I've had to have with specialists, like the conversations, like the risk management, you know, the things, the conversations you don't really want to have.
Mm-hmm.
We're again set, you know, set up for another C-section, you know, as the best way forward. I'm using air quotes.
Yes.
But I'm also so like not disconnected. That's not the word, but I want to say that like the how it will all happen, I have released so much of it. I like legitimately have no real plans except that I'm just going into this whole season with what happens happens, and my intention is even in the C-section to just go in with ease, and that has
Yeah.
actually felt so good. Like I could still create a very great environment, a great you know, birth process even through a C-section in and of itself. So that I think like that's the evolution, the learnings of how it's all really come about of like the my body isn't necessarily working against me, that it's what did I change that to? I think I rewired that to like oh, I can't remember what the positive side of that was, but it was just, like your body is there in so many ways just to like tell the story of what is actually, going on in our brain.
Mm, mm,
And that I think what that was a really big sign of was that there was still such a large disconnect between like my mental, emotional, and like spiritual bodies and then my physical body and how dissociated in many ways I had still been, up until that point. And so anyway, that was a long, long, long journey around all of the things, but
mm. Yeah, but so beautiful. I mean, not but, and so beautiful. And just there's so much in there that I want to chat with you about. And I wrote some things down. But the first thing I want to say is I just find it so interesting that life is so interesting because I relate so much to you in just how we are. Like that is also a big part of my journey here. I'm really good at pushing through. I'm really good at moving forward. I'm really good at like sometimes I think about like I'm like many people would not be able to cope with what I cope with on a daily basis. But to
oh,
me,
for
it's
sure,
just
totally.
like so I really get it, but and that is so wonderful to have as a quality, but there is the other side, which is like surrender, letting go, trust, letting go of control can all be really difficult. And I do think birth reveals so much about both what we might be challenged with, and that was a big challenge for me. I mean, my process was 90 hours long, and like, you know, it was this whole thing. And so, and I think part of that was me, right? Like it was hard for me to let go and to just be like, honestly, in my situation, it would be like, okay, the apartment's gonna be covered in poop, and that's just the way it's gonna be. But I really couldn't do that, and that was hard. But then also
Mhm.
the thing I want to highlight before I move forward into a different area of this conversation is that it is so much about them, right? And like
Yeah.
it is, I think it's so helpful to always like have, especially when we're talking about well-being or really when we're talking about anything, but just to like zoom out a little bit and be like, we're going to do our absolute best with this situation. And also, there's so much more going on that we have no idea about, right? And I think it's a common thread for these kids that come in right now that are choosing to come to Earth at this time. They have big missions, right? And someone said, "Oh, she just wanted to clear a bunch of karma real quick." And I was like, "Yep, okay, that makes sense, right?" So it's just like it can be so helpful to just we don't have to like what happened. I'm never gonna look back on that experience and be like, "That was awesome," but
I will, yes.
right? But we can look back on that experience and I've started to tell her little tiny pieces. I'm going to just share this. This is a bit of a tangent, but I'm going to share this because I think it's interesting. And then we're going to move forward. And I swear we're going to talk about what Kirstin does with women. I promise I'm not going to leave you in the lurch, guys. But I think it's important that she knows her birth story because I think that can inform, when she's older, inform their life, right?
Sure.
And she's always had this thing around water since she was born. Like she doesn't like any water on her head, which I know isn't that abnormal, but for me this felt like there was some connection to what she went through at birth and being washed without my consent and all this stuff. And the other day I was in the tub with her and I said to her, I don't know what caused me to say this, but I was like, "Look, baby, I know that when you were born, somebody washed you and it wasn't a good experience, and that's never going to happen again. And I promise only mommy or daddy," or whatever I said. And something shifted for her. Like she's
Mm.
way more chill around people rinsing her hair. She's she just like something clicked. It was like something about acknowledging that experience that she didn't have words for, but had a visceral in her body of. So I think it's so important that we as mothers, as these new generation of mothers that's probably a little more conscious about this stuff than our parents were, that we acknowledge this and that we don't dismiss it and that we do take the time to understand it to the best of our ability and to sort of keep it in mind and keep it as an experience that can help us parent these beings, right?
Yes. And you're not always going to know, you're
Right.
not always going to be able to connect the dots, but there's this like knowing, there's kind of like an intuition hit that is very common for us to like mentally be like, we can explain it all away in
Right.
many different ways. But you might know, you might get that hit of like, just like what you mentioned, you were like, I wonder if it might be this.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with you saying like exactly what you said. You just were like, I wonder. And then you just said, well, hey, look, this might be a thing, and this won't be a thing,
Right.
in the future. And trusting that knowing in your body is what literally all of this is all about.
Yeah.
All of it, because your body is communicating, her body was communicating. That was the point that I wanted to point out there, is that like
Yeah.
your body, the body tells a story. It does. It will literally tell you exactly where the issue is.
Mm.
And if you just tune in to listen and are open to the multiple possibilities of what it might be trying to tell you, that's tuning into that intuition. That's trusting yourself. That's coming back, right? To like, this is not just a separate experience that we're having. Every single thing is entirely connected. And for your kiddo, it's the same thing, giving her that gift of just being like, hey, let's acknowledge it. What
Hmm.
what happened? Like, you may not be like aware or remembering, but like your body is remembering. And sometimes it is, and kids respond very well to metaphors. They
Hmm.
respond very well to just kind of that direct communication, because their subconscious mind is open. They are literally in a hypnotic state until about 8 to 10 years old. So every single thing that they are taking in right now is has no filter,
Right.
because their filters are being created.
Right.
So yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's not that hard, right, to communicate with the subconscious mind in that way. Just yours is a very good example of that. But they're very open. So those metaphors, those direct conversations about something, they can be very effective.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I love what you just said about how the body tells a story because I think it's like it's similar with what I do. Your home tells a story too, and it's all about learning how to listen. And it's a language that you have gotten skilled in, but that your clients might not yet be. And it's sort of the same thing for me. And I want to sort of weave that into, I wrote this down when you said it, that your body was working against you because that is the story given to all women, whether consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously, when they are told they have a, what's it called? Oh my God, just flooded my mind. What's the medical word for autoimmune? Thank you.
Mm.
When you're told you have an autoimmune condition, right? Which
Mm.
so many women are, I'm sure like a large percentage of the people you work with have been told this. That's the underlying story, right? Your body is working against you.
Attacking itself. Yeah.
Yeah, attacking itself, right? Same
Yep.
story. And I'm so curious about sort of your perspective on this like autoimmune boom. And we're talking about women for now. Men are included in this, guys. I'm not
Mhm.
leaving you out, but most of you that are listening are women. So, I'm just really curious to hear like what your thoughts on that diagnosis and that sort of reality that we're living in is.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you the two sides of it, right? So from like a functional perspective, autoimmune disease has a lot of different causes, a lot of them. You hear in the functional world a lot about like leaky gut and intestinal
Mm-hmm.
permeability, and yes, that is a thing and it is part of it. However, it's not the only thing. There's genetic components to it. There's there's so many factors, right, that influence the immune system. So part of it is really understanding like why, where are kind of the gaps, right? Where are some of the breakdowns? Why did the immune system eventually decide to start attacking itself? Part of it can have to do with inflammation. It can have to do with certain types of foods like gluten. For so many people who are autoimmune, know that they really can't be, eating gluten. In general, gluten also, because it has a molecular mimicry, right? So basically, like what ends up happening is every time gluten comes into the system, the body doesn't know how to differentiate between self and gluten. So
Mm.
if gluten is continuing to come in, it will just kind of perpetuate that issue of
Hmm.
of the immune system attacking self. So there's like lots of different like bits and pieces, right, that come to all of that. I mean, we can be talking about toxins, we can be talking about the liver being supported enough, right, to be able to actually remove toxins. We can talk about like overload. We can talk about all the so many different factors that can influence the immune system. But the one that I look at the deepest and the most with autoimmune, while addressing all those underlying factors, is why would the self turn on itself, right? And when I talked about leaky gut and intestinal permeability, for those of you who are really unfamiliar with that, basically what I'm just saying is inside of the GI tract, I want you to picture if you were to make two hands, to make your hands into two fists and put them really tightly together, that those, each of your hands into, let's say they represent a cell, and that makes up your gut lining and like your skin. And if those start to get a little bit leaky, like if you were to like kind of just allow for your hands to kind of drift apart a little bit, things that are inside of the GI tract, like food and also other bacteria,
Mm.
also toxic bacteria, right? Like all of these things that can be in the outside world, but technically in your intestines, can start to make their way in between the cells, which they are not supposed to be able to do. Anything that goes into your body is supposed to go through the cells, not in between them. And the only thing that your body can do at that point is launch an immune response, an inflammatory response to those things that are coming in. That could be food. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
food particles, undigested food particles that are normal and should be there. That could be, we call them like that. So lipopolysaccharides, LPS, those could be endotoxins. They could be bacteria. They could be all sorts of things, right, that are coming into your immune system. And that blood is then circulating through your entire body, to your joints, to your brain, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason why inflammation in and of itself is like you start looking at the GI tract. Now, that is the physical side of it. And there's so many things you can do to affect that. However, it is also a breach of boundaries.
Mm.
And this is the other layer of which doesn't get addressed very often with chronic conditions, and especially autoimmune disease, is that breach of a boundary. There is a loss of a literal boundary between what is self and not self. So when we look at our life, where are we not holding boundaries? Where are we letting people potentially just walk all over us? People pleasing, good girl.
Mm.
um, let's keep going. Perfectionism, worth tied to achievements. The list can go on and on and on, but there are patterns of how, excuse me, having a really hard time saying no. There are patterns that come in to our world that we learn as little kids, as we just talked about, 8 to 10 years old. Your subconscious mind is being created during that time. We learn them from our mom. We learn them from other women. We learn them from people in our community. We learn them from teachers. We learn about our world and how we're going to develop our model of the world during that time. So it's no shade thrown to anyone. This is literally life. We will all have them.
Yes.
Even my kids, they will all have their things, no matter how perfectly I try to do anything. They will all have their own learnings, right? And you literally cannot do this perfectly. This is part of life. And so these patterns, these things play out into our adult life. And then this is a part of what can manifest in the physical body. So if we aren't actually addressing those underlying factors, those emotions too that go along with that, because the reason why we make a belief or we create a pattern around how we exist in the world, like we can't show up for, we can't say no, we can't, um, uh, I mean, we could go even further and deeper into that of like not being able to receive rest, not being able to receive, like we're so independent, right? We're hyper vigilant, we're hyper independent, we're hyper da, 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 da. All of these things. Trauma, another big one that is really common with autoimmune conditions is adverse childhood events, ACEs. These are traumatic events that can tend to happen as kids, that can then manifest into physical, issues later on in life. These are all different causes, but have so much to do with the mental and the emotional body in and of itself, of like how are we actually interacting with people in our environment in our model of the world. That is much, and talking about the energy of your home and energy of your energy, right? These are all big layers and pieces that go far deeper than just looking at like leaky gut, for example.
Totally. Yeah. And I think for me, I always, when I think about autoimmune, which I've heard many times, of course, I'm so curious if in the future that will not be a term that is used anymore because it feels like a term that doctors came up with. Guys, I'm going to be a little controversial here. Doctors came up with because they weren't really sure what was going on. Because I think that
Oh yeah.
there's just this like it's like you're saying, it's this conglomerate of factors because previous generations had plenty of trauma, right? But what they didn't have was they didn't have glyphosate. They didn't have pesticides sprayed on their food. They didn't have all of these, toxins that are unavoidable at this point. Like you cannot, even if you're eating perfect and organic, you are getting chemicals in your food. That is just a truth of where our world is right now. And that's not necessarily something to be afraid of. But the point is, it's a conglomerate effect, right? It's not just because you can't say no, or just because you're eating gluten, or just because you're this. It's that it's this conglomerate, this soup that creates the story that your body's going to tell. So I love that. The thing I love so much about the work that you're doing is that you're aware of that and you're looking at all that and you're not just like A plus B equals C, right? It's like
Yeah.
this. And that's, I think, what can be so maddening for people that have gone through the Western medical system with a chronic condition. Western medicine is amazing for
Oh yeah.
acute stuff. Amazing. Fantastic. Get in a car accident, go to the hospital. Doctors are just going to save your life, hopefully. They're incredible at that, right? Really, I'm just going to go for it. It sucks at chronic care.
Mhm.
Sucks because it's not built for that. So that's why it's so important for people listening to work with someone like Kirstin, who is looking at a whole perspective when it comes to chronic conditions. So let's kind of segue. I mean, please feel free to say anything you want about all the controversial things I just said.
Feel,
But
yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just one
yeah, yeah,
quick sentence
go in.
simply is just because living with endometriosis and being a functional medicine practitioner and
Mm,
a chiropractor on top of all of this stuff,
mm,
I was so deep into the like, it's got to be a physical problem,
right, right,
right? You
right,
just
right.
everything you talked about, eliminating all of the things, trying to be as perfect as possible with everything that I did. And this was the thing that was the what actually helped me heal. Like I do not have endometriosis pain anymore. I
Amazing.
very rarely get migraines, like super, super, super rare. Um, the thing that actually moved the needle, and there were a mix of them. This is why I say it's like a journey, right? It was about 6 months to a year. I already had a really good foundation, so let's say that those functional things and the physical things do matter.
They do
Um,
matter, yes.
but it was about a 6 to 8 month journey of digging into those deeper things and the mental, emotional pieces that we're talking about, those deeper patterns, the worthiness, the being enough, the all yada, yada, all that deeper healing that then not only did the pain go away, but I am far less perfect with my health. I
Yes.
don't actually,
Mm,
I don't, I actually brought in dairy again.
ditto.
Yeah, I brought in
After
dairy
10
again.
years.
And I don't get acne anymore to
Right.
dairy,
Right.
right? I don't get breakouts. I get breakouts to sugar, but that's
Yeah.
sugar.
Right.
So that's always going to be inflamed. It doesn't matter what you
Right.
do, but like I don't do a lot of the things that I was doing prior. Like, oh, there's a lot of times people come in and they look just like me. They were doing saunas and cold plunges, and they were doing, they made sure they were eating completely organic food, and their nutrition looks just like this amazing plate. I mean, it like better than I even eat, and like they've got the major water filters, which we do too. You should have them anyway. But
Water filter is very important.
yeah, water filtration is very important. But I mean, it's just like the list goes on and on and on. They're taking all the right supplements, they're doing all of these things, and I can see it, right from the start. Like there's deeper work that's got to happen here because you can be doing all of those right things and you're still not fully at, where you want to be. You're probably better. If you're doing all of those things, you've probably seen some progress in some way, shape, or
Yes.
form. Um, but in order to get to that kind of like full resolution, if we were to say it, or remission, or however we want to put that term, optimal health, if you can. And for some people, that is going to be an option. For some people, it's going to be just getting to what the optimal version of health can be for them.
Right.
Um, anyway, yeah, it's just those deeper layers actually help me to release a lot of that deeper healing, actually helped me to release a lot of the need to be perfect around a lot of the things that I was doing. And that was what moved the needle the most for me at that point, was when I was actually able to like get underneath all of that. So I just wanted to say that because you're right. And um, it again is like just for me a really good example of where yes, we are in a kind of a toxic soup of things. We've also become so disconnected from nature. We've become so
Mm-hmm.
disconnected from the earth. There's so much, right, that is like happening there where that that goes kind of far deeper than just it's about food or it's about toxins or it's about, whatever.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that in because I like could not, I 1,000,000,000% resonate and agree. And it's, I am that same person. I was doing all the things. And for me, what it was when that was doing all that was life got really narrow. It's like,
Yes.
okay, I'm okay. I'm doing pretty good, but I have to wake up 4 hours earlier than I have to leave because I have to make celery juice and then I have to wait an hour after the celery juice to do, like and it's like we can't travel because we can't go anywhere that doesn't have celery juice and all of those life gets really and maybe that's necessary for a period, right? Like that's often part of the journey of really
Yeah.
needing to like go through that time if someone's
Yep.
really suffering.
Yep.
Um but at a certain point, my question to myself was like, is this freedom? Is this living, right? No, it's like this controlled thing and where's the balance here, right? And so I think that that's really important that it's coming into the conversation, both the conversation you and I are having and the bigger conversation in general, and also to realize, ladies, that a lot of that biohacking advice and we could spend a whole hour talking about this, which we're not going to do right now, but a lot of that biohacking advice, cold plunges and all that stuff is really not studied on female bodies. It's studied on male bodies.
Yeah. That's getting better, but yes, it's true.
Yeah. Okay. So before I let you go, I would love to spend some time just sort of talking about what your current offers are, the process that you go through with people right now, how people can work with you, what you're excited about, all of that stuff.
Amazing. Okay. It actually is pretty quick. So one of the best ones that I'm like obsessed with, and you've also been inside it as well, and that I would say like really partners very well with the Clutter Lab, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because the energy of your home is so dang important. We didn't even talk about any of that, but like that has been something that's been on my radar for a while. But like going through the Clutter Lab has been wildly awesome, and it has really shown me a lot of how the energy of your home mirrors so much of what's going on for you too. And so
Mm-hmm.
back and forth, right? Anyway,
Yes.
so the what I'm talking about is the full body reset,
So
and
good.
it's a physical, it's just a whole food based nutrition program that's a couple of weeks that is really just designed to help get you back to eating whole foods because what I realized was like just even for myself, there were so many areas where like bars and protein
Yeah,
shakes
yeah.
and like, the fast, quick things that you do and you grab. And also too, I think for a lot of people, just like not really knowing how to implement, they know what to do, but like, how do I actually do it? How do I implement it? That was what I designed this program for. And it's 2 weeks. It's fast. It doesn't take very long, but it also really helps to kind of move the needle. People have lost weight on this program. They've found more energy. They've found less bloating. I mean, like just those really like let's just get down to the nitty gritty. Let's just look at
Foundational.
nutrition, foundational stuff. 2 weeks and it's under $100. So it's like really like ugh, I'm obsessed with this program. And I've also included in a kind of like mental, emotional, subconscious journey as a part of it that is an audio series. So it's very, very easy to listen to. You don't have to be like sitting down watching a video. You can watch it or listen to it on a, on a walk or while you're making dinner or whatever. And it's just that introduction. If you're like, wow, this conversation really resonated with me, but I'm really not sure if I'm fully ready to like both feed in, like, let's go, this would be an incredible way to just say, I'm interested. Let me just see what's here for me.
And is
Uh,
this, sorry, Kirsten,
yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
you're
I'm
okay.
bad at that. Is this evergreen now? And by evergreen, I mean, can people join this full
Yeah,
body reset at any time? Because I know
at
I
any time.
joined it when it was like running live, but
Yes, you can join at any time. And
okay,
Cody
good.
will have the link in the show notes.
I will definitely do that. Yeah.
And then I just have two others. I have basically a 3 month and a 6 month like one-to-one program with me that is essentially about like going a lot deeper. We in the 3 month option, there's a hair tissue mineral analysis that's included inside of that program that is basically designed to like, let's get at the foundations, let's look at minerals, let's look at how all of these patterns are playing out, and we can at least just start there. If you have any other labs, etc., we can always look at all of those things. And then I also have a 6 month option that includes a couple of other deeper like functional labs on top of that as well, just as a way to basically set up a really good baseline for where we're headed. And it includes both that like functional physical body side of it that everybody wants, the nutrition, the supplements, and all of that, but also includes that journey of like taking you down that road of getting in touch with the mental and emotional and energetic bodies and what they are really calling you to work on and work towards and heal. And I'm just the guide that basically helps you do that. So that's what it looks like.
Amazing. And I can put the links for those in the show
Yeah,
notes as well.
amazing.
One little question is, I'm sure people are wondering, those lab tests,
Yeah.
obviously they can be done at home, yes?
Yeah, actually, every single lab that is included in those are all done at home. The HTMA is just a hair sample, which is super easy. It's not a diagnostic test, but it was an amazing test to be able to
Mm-hmm.
like look at the patterns of how the body
Mm-hmm.
is doing. And so many people look at vitamins, but we really miss minerals, and minerals are super, super important. Uh, and then the other two labs could either be a hormone panel, they could be a deeper nutrition panel, look at the mitochondria and some other factors, and then a GI panel too, depending on what individuals, right? Everybody has something a little bit different. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just looking at those deeper layers. They can all be done at home. And if we need those standard labs, we'll order them, we'll
right,
get them. And
right.
that is obviously a blood draw usually, but we can look at deeper thyroid panels. We can look at cardiovascular, we can look at all those other things as well.
Amazing. I just think it's so helpful for people to have someone to walk them through this maze that really knows what they're talking about,
Mhm.
because especially now with the access to information that we have, it can be really confusing and it can get really expensive if you're trying to do this yourself and just buying all the things and da da da, So I think like it's such a worthwhile investment to just get set up in a way that's individualized and aligned
Mhm.
for your body. So thank you so much for being here. Where's the best place? Like, where do you hang out? Is it your newsletter, Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram usually is where I am the most. And it's at Dr. Kirstin. It's really easy to find. And then my website as well, which you'll have, is drkirstin.com. It's super, yep, easy peasy.
Yeah, everything will be in the show notes, guys. And we are talking in the month of late February, but I am guaranteeing that you're listening to this in the spring. So, what better time to do a little
Mm,
reset for your body than in the
mhm,
spring? Get ready
mhm.
for that summer fun. All right, Kirsten, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't go away. We'll talk. Bye.